My name is Letitia. I am 62 years old, and my occupation is a retired high school guidance counselor. Tears blurred my vision as I raced down the sterile hospital hallway, terrified my only child was taking his last breath. But as I reached for the handle of his intensive care room, I froze. From the other side of the heavy door came my daughter-in-law's voice, not weeping for her husband, but whispering a secret so cold it stopped my heart. She was telling someone the forged deed had just been filed. I will never forget the phone call that shattered my quiet Tuesday evening. The voice on the other end belonged to an emergency room nurse, and the words she spoke sent a violent jolt of terror straight through my bones. My son Marcus, my beautiful 35-year-old boy, had been in a catastrophic car crash. They told me he was in the intensive care unit fighting for his life, and that I needed to get there immediately. My hands trembled so violently I could barely grip my car keys. The drive to the city hospital was a blur of flashing traffic lights and panicked prayers. I begged the universe to spare my son, the boy I had raised all on my own, terrified I would arrive too late. When I finally pushed through the sliding glass doors of the emergency room, the sensory overload hit me like a physical blow. The sharp, bitter smell of antiseptic stung my nose, a scent that always meant sickness and fear. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pale glow on the linoleum floors. The nurse at the front desk pointed me toward the intensive care ward, and the hallway seemed to stretch out forever. Every step felt like walking through deep water. My breath hitched in my throat as I finally approached room 412, where my son lay broken. I reached out a shaking hand to push open the heavy wooden door, desperately needing to see his face and hold his hand. But my fingers stopped inches from the handle. Through the slight crack in the doorway, I heard my daughter-in-law, Chloe. She was not crying. She was not begging the doctors to save him. Her tone was sharp, calculating and chillingly calm as she spoke into her cell phone. I leaned in closer, holding my breath, and heard the exact words that turned my profound grief into burning outrage. She said the forged quitclaim deed had cleared the county clerk office this morning. In one breath, while my son lay on a ventilator, she was confirming she had successfully stolen our generational family home and put it entirely in her sole name. To understand the depth of my devastation in that hallway, you have to understand the journey Marcus and I walked together. His father walked out when Marcus was just a toddler, leaving us with nothing but a mountain of bills and a broken heart. But I refused to let that define my boy's future. I worked grueling hours as a guidance counselor during the day and took on tutoring jobs late into the night. Every extra dollar I made went into a coffee can on top of the refrigerator saved specifically for his education. I remember the nights we sat at the kitchen table going over his college applications, promising each other that hard work would pay off. I missed out on vacations and new clothes, but seeing Marcus graduate with honors was worth every single sacrifice. He was not just my son, he was my greatest achievement and my absolute best friend. We shared a bond forged in those quiet, struggling years, a deep and unbreakable trust. When he landed a demanding but rewarding job as a financial advisor at a top firm in the city, I wept tears of pure pride. He had overcome every obstacle we faced. He was a good, honest man who wanted nothing more than to build a stable, loving life. I thought I had protected him from the cruelties of the world, but I never imagined the ultimate danger would come from the woman he chose to love. That deep trust was exactly why I made the biggest decision of my life just 6 months ago. I gave him the keys to our entire family legacy. The property Chloe had just claimed as her own was not just a piece of real estate. It is a stunning, sprawling Victorian home that my grandparents purchased with literal blood, sweat, and tears during a time when it was incredibly difficult for our people to own such things. It has wide wrap-around porches, original oak floors, and a lush garden where my mother taught me how to grow roses. That house stood as a testament to our resilience, a sanctuary built on love and endurance. It has been the heart of our family for 3 generations, and the mortgage was paid off decades ago. When Marcus and Chloe started talking about starting a family of their own, I wanted them to have the perfect foundation. I wanted my future grandchildren to run down those same hardwood hallways. So I legally transferred the deed into Marcus's name. I signed that paperwork with a heart full of joy and a spirit full of hope. It was a mother's ultimate gift, a crown passed down to the next generation. It was meant to be his anchor, a symbol of my absolute faith in the man he had become. I moved into a smaller townhome nearby, completely happy to pass the torch. I never once worried about my security, because I trusted my son implicitly to protect our heritage. I should have listened to the quiet voice of warning in my spirit the very first day Marcus brought Chloe home. She was beautiful, certainly, but my motherly intuition immediately sensed something hollow beneath her polished surface. Chloe was overly concerned with appearances. Her eyes constantly darted around evaluating the cost of things, and her conversations always drifted back to designer labels, expensive cars, and luxury vacations. It felt like she viewed my son as a financial stepping stone rather than a true partner. But Marcus was utterly blinded by love, and seeing him so genuinely happy made me silence my own nagging doubts. Then came her older brother Jamal. From the moment Jamal stepped into our lives, he brought a dark cloud of chaos. He was a smooth talker with a long history of shady business ventures and failed, get-rich-quick schemes. Jamal was constantly pulling Marcus aside at family gatherings, asking for massive loans to fund his next supposed brilliant idea. Jamal had a way of making his demands sound like favors, manipulating my son's good nature with chilling ease. Marcus. Being the generous soul, he has always tried to help, even when it strained his own finances. I watched Jamal operate with a sickening sense of dread, recognizing a predator testing the fences. Yet I pushed my suspicions deep down. I told myself I was just being a protective, overbearing mother. I smiled at their family dinners. I welcomed them into my home, and I chose faith over suspicion. I convinced myself that Chloe's love for Marcus was genuine, and that Jamal was just a troubled man trying to find his way. I sacrificed my own peace of mind simply to keep the peace for my son. I never realized my silence was giving them the exact opportunity they needed to dismantle everything my family had built. I wanted to scream to burst through that heavy wooden door and tear her away from my son. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to attack her. But a strange, cold clarity washed over me. Survival instincts, honed over decades of protecting my child, took control. I knew that if I confronted her now, I would have nothing but my word against hers, a grieving mother acting hysterical. I reached into my purse with trembling fingers and pulled out my smartphone. I opened the voice memo app and pressed the red record button, holding the phone steady near the crack in the door. My heart hammered against my ribs so loud I feared she would hear it. Through the narrow opening, Chloe's voice came through crisp and clear, devoid of any sorrow. She paced at the foot of my son's bed, her expensive heels clicking softly on the floor. Then she delivered the blow that nearly sent me to my knees. She said with a chilling sigh of relief, once they declare him brain dead tomorrow, "The life insurance pays out to me, not his mother." She laughed, a dry, evil sound that echoed in the sterile room. She told the person on the phone that it was a multi-million-dollar policy and that all her problems were finally solved. She did not sound like a wife losing the love of her life. She sounded like a lottery winner counting her cash. I recorded every single syllable of her treacherous betrayal, forcing myself to breathe quietly while the world I knew shattered completely. I stood there, an unseen witness to pure evil, silently gathering the weapon I would use to destroy her. A moment later, I heard Chloe tell the person on the phone she was going to grab an iced coffee from the cafeteria down the hall. I quickly backed away, pressing myself into the shadows of a nearby alcove, just as the heavy wooden door swung open. She strutted down the hallway without a single tear on her face, checking her reflection in her phone screen like she was on her way to a casual lunch. As soon as she turned the corner, I slipped into the intensive care room. Seeing Marcus broke the last remaining walls of my composure. My strong, vibrant boy lay completely motionless, surrounded by a terrifying maze of plastic tubes, and the relentless rhythmic hissing of the ventilator keeping his lungs moving. His beautiful face was bruised and horribly swollen, and a thick bandage wrapped around his head. I collapsed into the chair beside his bed, taking his cold, limp hand in both of mine, and I wept until I had no tears left. I kissed his knuckles and whispered fierce promises that I would fix this. As I wiped my wet face, my swollen eyes landed on a clear plastic hospital bag, resting on the small visitor chair in the corner of the room. It contained the personal effects recovered by the paramedics from the crash site: his watch, his wallet, and his iPad. The glass screen of the tablet was severely spiderwebbed with jagged cracks, a frightening physical testament to the violence of the crash. But when I pressed the home button, it miraculously lit up. It was functional. I stared at the lock screen. I did not have to guess the password. I typed in the numbers representing his childhood golden retriever's birthday, and the device immediately unlocked. Marcus had everything synced to his cloud account, a habit he developed from his meticulous work as a financial advisor. I opened his messages and his storage drive, my hands shaking violently as I navigated through his private digital life, searching desperately for anything that would explain how this nightmare truly came to be. I opened the application folder dedicated to his vehicle dash camera, which I knew automatically uploaded footage directly to his secure cloud storage. I clicked on the most recent video file dated just hours ago. The high-definition video showed his car driving down a steep, winding road on his usual route home from work. But it was the audio that made the blood in my veins run ice cold. I could hear Marcus breathing heavily, and then he started shouting in pure, unadulterated panic. He was stomping on the brake pedal, but the heavy car was not slowing down at all. I heard my boy scream in sheer terror that the brakes were completely gone, right before the sickening, deafening sound of crunching metal and shattered glass ended the recording. This was no tragic accident. Someone had deliberately sabotaged my son's vehicle. Frantically, I switched over to his synced text messages, scanning for anything unusual. I found a hidden thread of messages between Chloe and Jamal that had been downloaded from a shared computer application. The words on the glowing screen made me physically sick to my stomach. Jamal had texted Marcus late the night before, begging to borrow the car for a quick late-night errand, giving him the perfect uninterrupted opportunity to cut the brake lines in the driveway. But the horror did not stop there. Scrolling further up in the sick conversation between Chloe and her brother, I discovered the identity of the mysterious person Chloe had been speaking to on the phone just moments ago. The lawyer was not a lawyer at all. It was Jamal. He had posed as a licensed public notary to illegally validate the forged signature on the quitclaim deed, pushing the fraudulent paperwork through the county clerk office, while Marcus was bleeding in a hospital bed. They had orchestrated the entire bloodbath. They tried to murder my only son to steal his multi-million-dollar life insurance policy and my historic family home, thinking they could pull off the perfect crime against an old woman. I shoved the cracked iPad deep into the bottom of my heavy leather purse, just seconds before the heavy door swung open again. Chloe walked back into the room, holding her large iced coffee, and immediately shifted her entire demeanor. The cold, calculating woman I had overheard in the hallway vanished completely. In her place stood the picture of a devastated, grieving wife. She let out a loud, theatrical sob, rushing to the other side of the bed and dramatically resting her head on Marcus's uninjured shoulder. She cried loud crocodile tears, wailing about how unfair it was and how she could not possibly live without her soulmate. Every single syllable that spilled from her glossy lips made my stomach churn with violent nausea. The urge to lunge across that hospital bed and wrap my hands around her throat was so powerful it made my vision blur. I wanted to scream the truth to expose her right there under the glaring fluorescent lights. But I forced the lioness inside me to lay back down. I knew that showing my hand now would give her the chance to destroy the evidence or flee the state with Jamal. I took a deep, shuddering breath and channeled every ounce of strength I possessed to master my burning rage. I played the part of the fragile, shattered, elderly mother. I slumped my shoulders, let my hands tremble, and wept softly into my tissue, completely agreeing with her fake sorrow. I patted her arm, comforting the very woman who had orchestrated my son's attempted murder. My performance was flawless. She looked at me with the fleeting glance of pure pity, utterly convinced I was just a weak old woman, completely blind to her sinister game. I told Chloe I needed to go home to shower and gather some clothes, promising I would be back by evening. But I did not go home. I drove straight downtown to the sleek office of Robert Hayes, a fiercely intelligent top-tier estate and criminal attorney known for destroying his opponents in court. I sat in his plush leather chair and dumped the contents of my purse onto his mahogany desk. I did not cry. I did not shake. I was cold, calculated, and ready for war. I played the audio recording of Chloe discussing the life insurance payout. I watched Robert's jaw tighten as he listened to her chilling laughter. Then I pulled up the dash camera footage from the cloud storage. The horrific sound of my son screaming that his brakes were gone filled the quiet office, followed by the sickening crash. Robert immediately called his private investigator to secure the cloud data before Jamal could realize his mistake and delete it. Next, we pulled up the public county property records on his large monitor. There it was, the quitclaim deed, transferring my historic Victorian home to Chloe. But as Robert zoomed in on the document, he pointed a pen at the bottom of the page. It was my signature, or rather a pathetic attempt at it. The idiot had misspelled my middle name, writing Letitia Marie instead of my actual legal middle name, Letitia May. It was a glaring, fatal error made by a sloppy forger. Finally, I showed him the downloaded text messages, where Jamal admitted to borrowing the car and posing as the public notary. Robert leaned back in his chair, a sharp, dangerous smile spreading across his face. He looked at me and said we had enough evidence to put them both in federal prison for decades. We spent the next 3 hours preparing the legal traps, meticulously assembling an arsenal so airtight that neither Chloe nor her brother would ever see the light of day again. The next morning, the tension reached a breaking point. I arrived at the hospital ward just as Chloe was loudly cornering the chief neurologist in the hallway. She was dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue, insisting that Marcus would never want to live hooked up to machines. She claimed they had a deep, intimate conversation just last month, a supposed verbal agreement where he explicitly told her to pull the plug if anything ever happened to him. The doctor looked sympathetic, explaining that as his legal spouse, she technically had the authority to make that devastating call if there was no written documentation stating otherwise. Chloe demanded they begin the process of removing his life support that very afternoon. She was rushing to cash in her winning lottery ticket before my son even had a chance to let the swelling in his brain subside. She thought she held all the cards, relying on the standard legal assumption that a wife automatically supersedes a mother. But she vastly underestimated the bond between me and my son, and she certainly underestimated my meticulous nature. I knew exactly what she was trying to do, and I had the ultimate shield to stop her dead in her tracks. Before I went to the hospital that morning, I had opened the heavy steel safe hidden in the back of my bedroom closet. Inside, nestled beneath my old tax returns and my grandmother's jewelry, was a thick manila envelope. 2 years ago, right before Marcus married Chloe, he came to my house with a lawyer. He told me that until he had children of his own, he wanted to make sure I was the only person making decisions about his health. We drafted a legally binding advance healthcare directive. The document explicitly named me his mother as his sole medical proxy, granting me absolute and exclusive authority over all his medical treatments, including life support, until independent neurologists definitively declared his condition irreversible. He had never mentioned this document to Chloe, a small act of self-preservation that was now saving his life. I stood quietly in the hospital corridor and listened to Chloe finalize the time for the life support removal. I did not yell, and I did not argue. Instead, I calmly walked up to the neurologist and requested a formal family meeting for noon. I insisted it be held in the private hospital conference room, stating we needed to review some final details before taking such a drastic step. Chloe rolled her eyes, sighing heavily, as if my grief was a massive inconvenience to her busy schedule. She agreed, entirely confident that she was about to inherit millions of dollars and a historic estate by dinner time. She had no idea I had already called my attorney, Robert Hayes, instructing him to meet me at the hospital with the original notarized directive. I was setting the stage for a trap she would never see coming. At exactly noon, I walked into the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital conference room. Chloe was already there, sitting at the head of the long table, with her arms crossed, looking at her watch. The chief neurologist sat to her right, looking deeply uncomfortable. As soon as I took my seat, Chloe did not even look at me. She simply told the doctor they needed to turn the ventilator off immediately, so Marcus could be at peace. She sighed and casually added that she had an expensive funeral to pay for and needed to get the house ready to sell now that the deed was fully in her name. I felt a surge of pure disgust, but I remained perfectly still. The heavy door opened, and my attorney, Robert Hayes, walked in, carrying his leather briefcase. Chloe snapped at him, asking who he was and why he was interrupting her private family tragedy. Robert did not raise his voice. He calmly opened his briefcase and slid a thick stack of stapled papers across the smooth table directly in front of the doctor. He announced that he represented me and that he was presenting Marcus's legally binding advance healthcare directive. He looked right into Chloe's eyes and explained that this document established me as the sole medical proxy. It completely stripped her of any legal right to make medical decisions for my son. Chloe turned bright red. She stood up so fast, her chair scraped loudly against the linoleum floor, screaming that she was his wife. And that piece of paper meant absolutely nothing. She yelled that she was in charge of his estate and his life. Robert smiled a cold, sharp smile and told her she was no longer in charge of anything. Right on cue, the conference room door swung open for a second time. 2 plainclothes police detectives stepped into the room, holding silver badges. I had tipped them off early that morning and handed over all our meticulously gathered evidence. The taller detective looked at Chloe and told her to sit back down because they had some very serious questions about her brother Jamal and a highly suspicious car crash. Chloe froze, her arrogance instantly evaporating. She tried to stammer out a pathetic defense, claiming she had absolutely no idea what they were talking about and that this was a horrible misunderstanding. That was my cue. I pulled my phone from my heavy leather purse, turned the volume all the way up, and pressed play. Chloe's own cold, calculating voice filled the quiet room, bragging about the multi-million-dollar life insurance payout she would receive once Marcus was declared brain dead. Then Robert set up his laptop and played the dash camera audio of my son screaming in sheer terror as his brakes completely failed on that steep hill. All the colour completely drained from Chloe's face, leaving her looking like a terrified ghost. She tried to push past the chairs and run for the door, but the detectives swiftly blocked her path. The taller officer grabbed her wrists, pulling them sharply behind her back, and the metallic click of the heavy steel handcuffs sounded like absolute music to my ears. He read her Miranda rights loud and clear, arresting her on the spot for felony fraud conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and attempted murder. As they marched her out of the room crying genuine tears of panic. This time, the lead detective turned to me and nodded respectfully. He confirmed they had already dispatched a heavily armed tactical unit to Jamal's apartment across town to arrest him for vehicular sabotage and grand forgery. My trap had sprung perfectly. Fast forward 6 months, and the dark storm clouds that nearly destroyed us have finally broken to let the bright sun shine through. Through a swift and aggressive legal battle, Robert successfully had the forged quitclaim deed completely reversed, legally restoring the generational Victorian home to our family where it rightfully belongs. But the greatest victory of all was not recovering the house. Against all medical odds, Marcus miraculously woke up from his coma just 3 weeks after that terrible day in the hospital. He is currently undergoing rigorous physical therapy and making incredible progress every single day. He is living safely back in our family home with me, and I am cooking his favorite meals while he rebuilds his strength. As for Chloe and her brother Jamal, they are currently sitting in cold concrete cells without bail awaiting their federal and state sentencing. The prosecutors assured me they are looking at several decades behind bars for the sheer cruelty of what they orchestrated. Sometimes I sit on this wide wrap-around porch of our beautiful historic house, watching Marcus slowly practice walking in the rose garden, and I reflect on the terrifying journey we survived. I learned the hardest way possible that true evil can easily wear a pretty smile and designer clothes. But I also learned the unstoppable power of a mother's intuition. Never doubt that quiet voice warning you to protect your family, and never underestimate the fierce, unrelenting love of a mother defending her child. Never underestimate a mother's intuition, and never mistake our kindness for weakness. We will walk through fire to protect our children. It does not matter how old they get or how successful they become, they will always be our babies. When someone threatens the family we built with our own 2 hands, that deep primal instinct takes over completely. I want every mother listening to this to remember the profound strength you carry inside your heart. We are the fierce protectors of our legacy, the quiet observers of truth, and the ultimate shield against those who try to bring us harm. If you have ever had to stand up for your family against someone you thought you could trust, I want to hear your story. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice. It helps us build a strong community of survivors. And I want you to let me know down in the comments below, what city are you watching from today? And exactly how many minutes into the story did you realize Chloe was up to no good? Thank you so much for listening to my journey, and please stay safe out there.